In the year 2009, scientists managed to reprogram the measles virus to help cure diseases instead of causing them. They even succeeded in curing cancer, but they lost control of the virus, and it ended up infecting most of the population, turning them into dangerous mutants that feed on people and are weak to sunlight. 3 years after the initial outbreak, New York City turned into a complete desert, with zoo animals roaming freely through the streets. The only survivor was Robert, a former army virologist who spent his days with his dog, Sam. Whenever they went hunting, Sam helped Robert find the animals, and they chased them through the streets in a car. Robert was always armed and a great shooter, but he also had a good heart. And when he saw a family of lions hunting, he allowed them to eat the meat. He also kept an alarm on his watch to ensure he didn't stay out past sunset. As soon as the alarm went off, Robert immediately returned to the same house he lived in before the outbreak, which had been fortified to the maximum. He always made sure to pour a liquid on the stairs so that the mutants wouldn't trace his scent. Inside his house, Robert kept a good supply of food and old news tapes that allowed him to maintain his sanity by pretending to follow the old routine. He also listened to music, talked to Sam, and did his usual tasks, like cooking for both of them and giving his dog a bath. At nightfall, he closed all doors and windows. No matter how much he tried to distract himself, his dark memories always came back. He hid in the bathtub with Sam and some weapons, and the sound of the mutants outside made him think of his family. When the outbreak happened, the government decided to isolate the island, as it was ground zero. Robert rushed to get his wife Zoe, his daughter Marley, and Sam, who was still a puppy back then. He wanted them to leave the island and go to a relative's place, and Zoe got angry when she realized that Robert wouldn't go with them. He was going to stay to analyze the virus and find a cure. This generated a discussion between them that almost made Robert crash the car. However, he didn't give up searching for a cure even in the present. Every morning, after exercising with Sam, he went to the laboratory in his basement to monitor his experiments. Sam couldn't go downstairs because she could be infected, but Robert was safe because he was immune to the virus. In the laboratory, there were many rats trapped carrying the virus, and Robert was testing on them the different serums he had made. So far, all had failed, but on that day, Robert discovered that one of the rats was actually improving. This meant he could move on to the next stage of the test, but he needed a human. After that, Robert and Sam visited a video rental store, where he placed several mannequins in an attempt to maintain the illusion of a normal routine. Robert talked to them as if they were old friends, and always returned the movies he had picked before choosing others. He also pretended that one of the mannequins was trying to flirt with him. Next, they went to a place where Robert was cultivating vegetables to take back to his house. He also kept a map of all the houses they had visited and chose a new one each day. This allowed them to find new supplies of food, although they mostly found medicines and cleaning products. Sometimes Robert also came across depressing things left behind by the people who lived there, like their own bodies, or even toys that were never used. After refueling the car, Robert proceeded with the last part of his routine, which involved going to the pier on South Street to broadcast a recording inviting all survivors to meet him there. While he waited, he enjoyed playing golf on top of the Air Force planes. Later, Sam spotted a deer running, so she and Robert started chasing it through the streets. The deer panicked when it encountered a blocked road and entered an old, dark building. Sam chased after it and also went inside, which made Robert nervous since such a dark place could be the perfect nest for the mutants. Since Sam didn't come out when she was called, Robert had to enter as well, and he was trying to stay as quiet as possible not to reveal his presence. Robert heard some terrifying noises that scared him, but he refused to leave without his companion. It took him some time to gather courage before moving forward. He followed a trail of blood up the stairs that led him to the deer. As Robert continued his search, he encountered a group of mutants that seemed to be sleeping. Luckily, he managed to step back quietly, keeping his flashlight away from them. Robert left that room and finally found Sam hiding under a table, refusing to come out because she was frightened. At that moment, a mutant lunged toward Robert. He shot immediately and started running alongside Sam. Robert told Sam to take a different corridor to escape through another route. He ran to the window and jumped from the top when the mutants caught up with him. The two mutants that followed him were killed by the sunlight. After reuniting with Sam, Robert prepared a special trap using a cloth at the entrance of the building and a truck on a bridge, held by a cable. He told Sam not to follow him to avoid infection. Then he took some of his own blood and threw it onto the cloth. As soon as a mutant approached to feed on the blood, the trap was activated, causing the truck to fall and drag the mutant, leaving it hanging. Another mutant appeared, almost leaving the building to roar at Robert, but quickly retreated when the sunlight began to burn it. Moments later, Robert was with the female mutant he had captured in the trap, tying her to the table to test the cure he was developing. He used an ultraviolet light to confirm that she was infected with the virus. Then he injected the same serum that worked well on the rat. After a few seconds with no reaction, suddenly the mutant began screaming and struggling against the restraints. She eventually passed out, and all her vital signs dropped to zero. Robert immediately gave her another injection to keep her alive. He also couldn't contain his anger due to the failure. Next, he placed the mutant behind a glass door before documenting his progress throughout the day, mentioning that one mutant purposely exposed itself to sunlight. That made him think that decreased brain function or food scarcity might be causing them to ignore their survival instincts. Robert recalled the day of the outbreak once again, where people were panicking in the streets. Many ships were leaving the island, but only those with authorization could pass. People didn't want to be left behind in quarantine, especially those with children who begged for help. The soldiers were ordered to escort Robert and his family to a safe location, so they continued on foot. When they reached the port, the soldiers used a scanner to ensure they weren't infected. Marley passed, but Zoe didn't, which led Robert to create a scene and use his rank as a lieutenant colonel to request a second check. Zoe passed the test this time, and as a military family, they departed on the helicopter. Robert said goodbye to Zoe and Marley, who decided to leave Sam with him so she could protect him. Back in the present, Robert and Sam followed their usual routine, but at the end of the day, something strange happened. There was a mannequin near the bridge, and Robert was sure he didn't place it there. Feeling like he was going crazy, Robert shot the mannequin to prove it wasn't real, and it simply fell to the ground. Then Robert thought he heard whispers around him and started shooting wildly into the air. Since nothing happened, Robert decided to check the mannequin, but as he approached, a car fell, and he got caught in a rope. What happened was that the mutants copied his trap. He hit his head and passed out as the blood started dripping on the ground. Moments later, Robert woke up when the alarm on his watch went off. Sam was still there, and the sun was about to set. He used a knife to cut the rope, but when he fell to the ground, he accidentally hurt his leg with the knife. In agonizing pain, he had to drag his body. Initially, Sam followed him, but she stopped when she heard some growling coming from the building. That mutant from before was there with 3 infected dogs. He released them to go after Robert, but the dogs retreated when they got hurt by the last rays of the sun. Robert made an effort and ran to the car to get a gun just before the sunset, allowing the dogs to attack. Sam jumped on one of them while Robert fought the others, but she ended up being bitten, and Robert managed to kill all the dogs. Sam was badly injured and was taken to the laboratory, where she received a dose of serum. Then he held her in his arms and sang a song to her, but she was slowly starting to transform. Devastated, Robert had no choice but to euthanize her, choking her until she died. After that, he went to a place to give Sam a proper burial, taking several medications in an attempt to numb the pain. When he returned to the video rental store, he talked to the mannequin, saying that he had promised his friend he would do this. Robert was so furious that he drove out at night to run over the mutants in search of revenge. He managed to kill some, but others attacked him under the orders of their leader. They even climbed a lamppost to make it fall onto the car. Afterward, they overturned the car and left Robert trapped inside. When the leader entered the car through the window, a sudden ultraviolet light blinded all of them, making the mutants flee. Robert wasn't feeling well, but he was able to hear another person inside the car and gave them the address of his house. He told them to wait until dawn because they couldn't be followed, and then he passed out. That night, Robert had another dream about his family. After the helicopter took off, the government bombed the bridge to isolate the island. One of the helicopters lost control when people tried to jump on it, and it crashed into Robert's family helicopter. The next morning, he woke up to the sound of the Shrek movie playing on his TV, and his leg wound had been treated. Despite being in his house, he was still cautious and grabbed a gun before going to the kitchen, where for a moment he thought he saw his family, but it turned out to be Anna and her son Ethan, who had saved him the previous night. Robert sat with them and listened to Anna's story. They came from Maryland and stopped at the pier when they heard Robert's message. They were heading to Vermont because there was a safe zone with many survivors in the mountains where the virus couldn't survive the cold. Robert refused to believe it and told Anna that everyone is dead. Realizing how nervous he was, he left the kitchen to be alone for a while. Once he calmed down, he rejoined the others and began mimicking the lines of the movie characters exactly. He said he likes Shrek, probably because he identifies with him for not having friends. After thanking Anna for rescuing him, they talked a bit, and she explained that she was on a Red Cross evacuation ship leaving Sao Paulo. Anna's group returned to the coast to search for supplies. Some got infected, and others died. Anna still intended to go to Vermont, but Robert refused to go, explaining that he wanted to stay at Ground Zero and find the cure. He placed the mutant on a lot of ice to change the body temperature in an attempt to help the serum work better. Anna looked around the laboratory and saw several photos showing that Robert had tested many versions of the serum on humans. Then Robert picked up Ethan from the couch and took him to his daughter's old bed. Anna found photos of Robert's family, and he told her a bit about them, explaining that his daughter's name was a tribute to Bob Marley. As Anna had never heard of him, Robert put on a CD to play. At nightfall, Robert closed all the windows, and once again, Anna tried to convince him to go with them. She said she was sure there was a colony because God told her. Robert yelled, saying that most of humanity is dead, and the rest turned into monsters, which meant that this God doesn't exist. The conversation was interrupted when they heard some noises outside. The mutants followed the scent of Robert's blood. Anna ran to get her son, while Robert activated the lights he installed outside, but the mutants just jumped over them and destroyed them. Then he activated several explosives that he buried as a precaution, killing the first horde of mutants. After that, he went upstairs to look for Anna, and at that moment, he was suddenly attacked by the leader, and they began to fight. Robert used a screwdriver he found on the floor, but the leader didn't feel much pain and threw Robert downstairs. Robert took the opportunity to grab a hidden gun and shot the leader, but he dodged the shots and hid. Then Robert shot the gas canister to cause an explosion. The leader fled again, and despite Robert following him, he managed to escape through a window. The gun ran out of ammunition, and Robert went after Anna and Ethan, finding them hiding under furniture while a mutant was tearing through the roof of that room. There was a gun on a table, so Robert ran to it and shot the mutant as soon as it came down to attack. Robert looked out the window and saw that the leader was with even more mutants, so the three ran to hide in the laboratory. While the mutants climbed the building to enter through the hole in the roof, Anna and Robert were shocked to discover that the subject was improving. He had finally found the cure, but before they could evaluate it further, the mutants arrived at the laboratory. Robert closed a very sturdy glass door, trying to tell the mutants that they could save them, but they paid no attention. The leader also arrived and managed to crack the glass with his immense strength. Robert dropped the gun and took a sample of the blood containing the cure. After that, he opened a door and told the two of them to go inside, handing the blood to Anna. Although there was space for him, he chose not to enter because the mutants wouldn't give up. He told them to stay there until dawn and closed the door. The leader continued to beat on the glass. Robert opened a drawer and took out a photo of his family. That was his final smile, because shortly after he picked up a grenade and had already chosen his fate. Then the leader broke the glass, and that's when Robert jumped and sacrificed himself, being burned along with the mutants. Sometime later, Anna and her son finally arrived at the place they were looking for. Robert dedicated his life to discovering the cure and restoring humanity. Thus he became a legend, and the movie ends.